going to talk about today is working to prepare to write a story. And we're going to use an idea called a story sequence chart. And we talked about that in week 3 and week 4 of Essentials. But I feel like it's worth reviewing one more time. So I want you to start with a fresh sheet of paper. And at the top, I want you to place the words story sequence chart. Now I want you to think for a moment, what does the word sequence mean? I would say maybe the order of things. What kind of things can you think of have a sequence? I thought about counting. We've been learning skip counting in foundations. So let's think 10, 20, 30, 40, 70, 80. Well, that's not right. We know that's out of sequence. We would have to say 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 so that we do not skip. You could also think about directions to maybe put a paper airplane together. If you did not follow the directions, your plane may not fly. We could also think about your day. Does your day have a sequence? Mine does. When I get up in the mornings, I get up, I make my bed, I get showered, I get dressed, I brush my teeth, I comb my hair, I make breakfast, we eat breakfast, and then we start our school day. So let's think about it in terms of our CC day, and what if we showed up at CC and, well, we got up and we got dressed, but we forgot to eat our breakfast? We'd have a pretty miserable day, or at least until lunch. Or you could think about it, what if I got up, I ate my breakfast, but I forgot to get dressed? Well, I'd be pretty embarrassed at CC if I did not get dressed before I got there. So you see, sequence is pretty important, and it is particularly important for stories. So we're going to look at sequence and how it relates to stories. So we're going to draw a line about the middle ways down our paper. And on the right side, I want you to put a Roman numeral 1, followed by 1, 2, 3. You'll want to leave a space. And then Roman numeral 2, followed by 1, 2, 3. Leave a space. Roman numeral 3, 1, 2, 3. So and then I want you to put a line going across your paper, dividing the 1 from the 2, and then do the same, dividing the 2 from the 3. So basically, we have divided our paper into 6 sections. So now I want to ask you, what makes a good story? Have you ever written a story or started to write a story only to realize that story doesn't sound too good, it's not making a lot of sense, or I don't even know what to write? Well, a story sequence chart is going to help us put those ideas in the correct order or the correct sequence so that when we are done writing our story, it will make sense to our readers. So, the first thing that you usually hear about in a story is what? Well, we usually hear about characters. And what else do we normally hear about in our story besides the characters? We hear about the setting, where this story is happening, when this story is happening. So if you want to get the characters and the setting, you will need to ask yourself some questions. Who is in the story? What is he like? What is her situation? Or condition? What is his personality? Or character? If we ask who to find out about our character, what kind of questions do you think we would need to ask to find out about our setting? Well, we would probably want to ask, where is this happening? And when is this happening? When you are reading a story and it tells you where and when, what does that do to your mind? Well, you get an image in your mind. It paints a picture. Ancient world is very different from the modern world. So if you were talking about a princess in a castle in the 16th century, that is much different than a princess living in Gulfport in 2018. So it's very important that we tell about our setting, when it is happening and where it is happening. By answering these questions, who and what is that character like, and where and when it's happening, you are creating a good image about the character and the setting of your story. So if I said to you, there's a girl named Anne, and Anne woke up one morning to find that she had no milk to go with her cereal. So she went to her money box and she retrieved some money. She headed out, grabbed her coat, headed out the steps on the way to the corner market. And it was a beautiful fall day, and she went to pick up some milk. She grabs her milk, she pays for it, she turns around, she heads back home, she pours her cereal in the bowl, pours her milk in the bowl, and then she enjoys a bowl of cereal. Now that sounds like a pretty boring story. But instead, what if I said, Anne woke up to find no milk in the cold refrigerator to go with her box of Honey Nut Cheerios. So she went to her gray metal money box, lifted the creaky lid, retrieved some crisp dollar bills, placed them in her pocket safely, went to the door, retrieved her coat from the coat rack, headed out the door, down the steps, and down the walkway, and she tightened her coat up around her neck because it was such a cold, blustery day. And as the leaves were whirling around her, and as she is walking toward the corner market, she hears a rustling over in the bushes. She looks over to her left to see where the noise is coming from, and there she sees a dog with its vicious teeth showing, growling at her. And she realizes she's in trouble. So you see how the two differences in the story, they both have action, but look at the difference. You can see Anne headed to the store, what the weather is like. You can almost feel that it's cold. We didn't tell all those details in the first story, so we have painted a better picture in the second story. But to make that story better versus just Anne coming home to enjoy her meal, that's kind of boring. So what we could do we need a problem. And that's what we did. We created the dog, and that it's vicious, that's looking at her. And so that dog, and what's going to happen with that dog, we have now made a conflict or a problem. So we are going to ask, what kind of questions do you think? We would say, well, what is the problem? So we would say, what does Anne think, say, or do? So if we think back to our story and the dog, we would have to add details about the thoughts going through her mind when she sees the vicious dog. Does she say anything, or does she stay silent? What does she do? Does she turn and run, or does she slowly walk away? Those are all going to be ideas that affect how our story would come out. And then the third thing, if we have a problem, we've got to fix the problem. So that is the solution that we would need, because we would need to solve our problem. And this is the moment in the story where you just cannot stop reading, because you want to know what happens to Anne. Is the dog going to attack her? Or is she going to get away safely? And you as the writer get to determine how this story will end. Will it be a tragedy, or will it be a triumph? So we call this moment the climax or solution. So what question do you think we should ask here? Well, I think we should ask, how? How is Anne going to get away from that dog? How does she solve the problem? How is the problem solved? And then after we have solved the problem, at the end, we should ask ourselves, why did we even tell this story at all? Why did these characters do this? What was the author trying to tell us? Was there some kind of message or moral? It's like our story that we did last week with the boy who cried wolf. The message or moral of our story is to always tell the truth because one time you may not need someone and you might not be telling the truth and no one comes to your aid to help you. So it's always important to tell the truth. So this is our story sequence chart, and we are going to use the story of the town mouse and the country mouse to come up with a story sequence chart. So the town mouse and the country mouse. Now you must know that a town mouse once upon a time went on a visit to his cousin in the country. He was rough and ready, this cousin, but he loved his town friend and made him heartily welcome. Beans and bacon, cheese and bread were all he had to offer, but he offered them freely. The town mouse rather turned up his long nose at this country fare and said, "I cannot understand, cousin, how you can put up with such poor food as this. But of course you cannot expect anything better in the country. Come you with me, and I will show you how to live. When you have been in town a week, you will wonder how you could ever have stood a country life." No sooner said than done. The two mice set off for the town and arrived at the town mouse's residence late at night. "You will want some refreshment after our long journey," said the polite town mouse, and took his friend into the grand dining room. There they found the remains of a fine feast, and soon the two mice were eating up jellies and cakes and all that was nice. Suddenly they heard growling and barking. "What is that?" said the country mouse. "It's only the dogs of the house," answered the other. "Only?" said the country mouse. "I do not like that music at my dinner." Just at that moment the door flew open. In came two huge mastiffs, and the two mice had to scamper down and run off. "Goodbye, cousin," said the country mouse. "What, going so soon?" said the other. "Yes," he replied, "better beans and bacon and peace than cakes and ale and fear." So, we will start out with this story looking at our characters and our setting. So who do we have as our character in this story? And we have the town mouse. And what was the town mouse like? Or what was the situation? Why was the town mouse at the country mouse, his house? So the town mouse was there because he had visited. He was there to visit his cousin in the country. So you see, we have that this is the town mouse. We are telling why the town mouse is there. We are telling how he is related to the country mouse, and it tells you where he's at. It tells you he is in the country. Now, what else do we know about this setting? We know that they are having the country mouse has offered the town mouse a simple dinner. Of beans and I said etc. because it's beans and bacon, cheddar or cheese and bread. And the town mouse, what is he like? Is he grateful for the food he's receiving, or is he being snooty? And we see that the town mouse is being, I say, snooty. And what do we know about the country mouse? The country mouse is poor. And the town mouse wants him to visit the city. And that's the next place that they will go. And we will need to add more information here because we want to answer, why does the town mouse want the country mouse to go to the city? And he wants him to go there because he wants him to learn how to live. And what else do we know about these two and where they're going? So the two mice go to town. Now, you have a picture here. You have a town mouse. You see that he's come from the city to visit his cousin in the country. The cousin in the country feeds him a simple dinner with beans and other simple fare like bacon and cheese and bread. But the town mouse is very snooty. He's not grateful for what the country mouse is doing. And he tells him, "You poor mouse, you have no idea what you're missing. I want to take you to visit the city so that you can learn how to live." And so the two head off to town. Okay, so far, and you would add imagery and good verbs, strong verbs. Don't use went. You could say travel to the city. You would want to use an ly adverb in this to dress this up, a who which clause. And you would also want to use some vocabulary words that we have learned about in our past lessons to really paint a picture so that you can see what these characters are like and what the setting is like. And now we move to our conflict or problem. And so what is that problem? Okay, so they have arrived in town and it says that he will want some refreshment after his long journey. So where does he take him? And he takes him into the grand dining room for a feast. And that is where this conflict is happening. So you see it kind of blends that I guess it helps us go into this next problem describing where it's happening since we moved locations and the problem is happening in a different place. So we need to make sure that we address where that's happening. And as these two mice are enjoying their feast, what do they hear? What are they hearing? They are hearing growling and barking. And what do they think? Or what does the country mouse think when he hears this growling and barking? What kind of feelings does he have? And he becomes very anxious because he does not know what that noise is. I'm sure he thinks he knows what it is. And so what does the town mouse say to the country mouse? And he says it is only the dogs. Do not worry. And what does he do? Well, he sees that these are huge mastiffs and he becomes frightened. This is telling what he sees and how he is feeling about this problem. Now, we have a problem. How are we going to fix that problem? How are we going to solve that problem? So what do the mice do? How do they solve their problem? They scamper away. And how does the country mouse solve his problem? The country mouse leaves immediately. And what does the town mouse say to him? He says, "Why are you leaving so soon?" And the country mouse tells the town mouse that he would rather have his beans in peace than to stay, that it would be better to have his beans in peace than to have cake and ale in fear. So, we have painted a picture of who our characters are and where it's happening. We painted a picture here with a grand dining room and a feast, and that is where that problem is happening. We tell what they are seeing, they're hearing growling, barking dogs. Once they hear that problem, which is the growling, barking dogs, we're telling how the mice feel. They're anxious. So we are building here. And the town mouse is saying it's no big deal. It's only the dogs. We do not need to worry. And then what do they see? They see these huge mastiffs. And how do they feel when they see them? They are frightened. So we have set up this problem, and we're not sure what is going to happen to the mice. Are they going to live or die? And so we have to figure out how the problem is solved. Now, we could say that the dogs came in and they ate the mice, and that means the problem is solved. Or we can, and that's a tragedy, or we can make this a triumph. And so the mice scamper away, and the country mouse leaves immediately. And the town mouse is saying, "Well, why are you leaving so soon?" And he says, "Well, it's better for me to eat my beans in peace than to eat cake and ale in fear." And so now we have solved our problem, and we have created this story that draws us in and makes us want to read this story. So this week, when you are doing your lesson, it is lesson number 6, The Croc and the Croak, and I want you to complete your outline, the story sequence chart, and retell the story just like I've done to make sure that it makes sense. Then I want you to write your story. And I want you to give us a lot of imagery. I want you to make sure that we have an ly adverb in all 3 paragraphs. I want you to use a who, which clause in all 3 paragraphs. I want you to use strong words in all 3 paragraphs. I do not want you to use said or say, go or went. There are better verbs that create better images than those words. Then I want you to use alliteration once in your entire paper. And that is where you have 3 words that start with the same letter or the same sound. And then I want you to try to use as many vocabulary words from the previous lesson. So that would be lessons 1 through 6. And I want you to try to use those vocabulary words in your writing to see if you cannot bring this story to life and help paint a better picture. I hope this has helped you understand story sequence chart a little bit better, and I look forward to hearing your stories next week. And remember, if you have any questions, please send me an email or call or text me.